and be able to talk through kind of what the process looks like in terms of seeking supports in college. We'll go ahead. We have a very short time with these college reps. We've got until 10:10, so we'll get as many of these questions answered as we can. And then we will, if there are follow-up questions, we'll share information of these college reps. Otherwise, we highly encourage whatever your next steps are, that you're reaching out directly to the college reps on that campus because they'll be able to answer your specific questions related to you as a student or parents who are helping their students inquire about what things look like. So I'll just go ahead and get us started. Tina, I'll have you kind of answer this first question. Thinking about, we've got 2 months left with our students here before they graduate. What steps can we be helping the students with? Or what steps should students be taking just to help make sure that they're prepared for classes in the fall?
Okay, good morning. I would say some of the most important things to start doing would be to be able to articulate what your needs are. Knowing what your strengths, weaknesses, I don't even know if I'd say strengths and weaknesses, what your needs are, that's better. What your needs are is going to make a huge difference when you're registering with the disability office at whatever university you go to. Being able to describe specifically how your disability negatively impacts you in a classroom or testing situation. What kind of barriers appear for you when you don't have accommodations at all? So I would say really working on your transition plan. What are your goals? I'd say the most important thing to remember when getting here is to really pay attention to your syllabus for each class, because the syllabus is, for lack of a better comparison, the Bible for that class. It's the thing that you have to really focus on. It's got all the information you need. And so learning how to speak for yourself and represent yourself. And it's okay too, your freshman year, we don't expect you to be able to do that all the time in every situation by yourself. And so your contact at the disability office is there to help. So know that you don't have to take or go through things alone when you're trying to deal with accommodations and professors. And so knowing that we're your support, I'd say those are the biggest that I can think of off the top of my head as far as documentation you need, that type of thing.
Great, thank you. Definitely, so the highlight of that, just making sure that students can articulate kind of where that support benefits them. What are they getting in high school and what might they see needing on your campus?
Yes, and understanding that college is not quite the same as high school. And so some of the accommodations that you've had in high school may not be appropriate for the college setting. And so that's the conversation you want to have with your disability office contact.
Awesome, thank you. Tammy, I'll have the next question for you. Can you talk us through the steps again? Some students may be familiar with this already, but if they're not familiar, what steps do they need to take in order to seek out accommodations and support on your campus?
I think for the invite, I'm Tammy Kinney. I'm from Illinois State University. What our process looks like is you need to apply for accommodations. You can do that through our website online. Our process is fully online. You need to supply documentation. And so once you do the application and the documentation to go with it, a coordinator from our office is going to reach out and have the interactive process with you to talk about what you've applied for, what documentation supports, and brainstorm if there's anything additional we might be able to assist you with through the process. Once that happens, we have a documentation review committee here at ISU, and they will take all your information through the committee, determine eligibility, and then they'll let you know the outcome of the determination. And then the last part is you need to schedule an access training with your coordinator, and that's to help you learn the system that we have here at the university and how to request tests, note takers, alternative text if you need it, anything like that. And so, and then once you're up and running, those accommodations are good, for the whole time you're here at ISU. We don't make you come back every semester. And we also, encourage you to come back if you're struggling in any of your classes and let us know exactly what's going on so that hopefully we can, assist you further if possible.
Awesome. So again, to summarize, step one, probably an online form, if not dropping into the office on the college campus. And then they'd have a meeting with someone. That meeting then will help take that information and then figure out what's approved outside of that meeting, correct? Awesome. And then, Tammy, I heard you say students don't need to come back every semester. Is that similar across other campuses, or at other campuses, are they expected to come back? Looks like it's the same. Great. Awesome. I think last year, maybe that changed, or maybe COD, maybe. So there are some colleges that might have different protocols. So again, once you take that initial step on your college campus, they'll be able to talk to you if there's anything different. But looks like there's some unison amongst the group that's here today. Kitty, I'm going to give you the next one, and probably one of the more fun ones. What are some of the biggest differences between supports in high school that students may have experienced compared to what's on your campuses, and where might there be also similarities?
Perfect. Thank you. I'm Kitty. I'm one of the two here from U Chicago. And I would say the biggest differences aren't necessarily in the supports that we provide, but in how students interact with those supports. So in a K through 12, usually the supports kind of find them, they come to them. On our campus, students do have to apply. They have to come to us and register as having a disability. And then that is how we engage with them in that way. Your faculty will not be looking out to see if you have a disability or if you need any sort of support services. That is something that you, as a student, will have to do. Also, parents are typically not involved. The student needs to be the one to go through that due process and apply through our office. Um, Similarities, I would say most students are able to get the accommodations they had through K through 12. We don't have, it's not a perfect situation all the time, but if they had extended time, we're usually able to honor that here. I would say the biggest difference, though, is students having to engage in that process versus the process coming to them.
Awesome. Anything else folks would like to add in terms of any similarities or differences? Saw a lot of head nods as Kitty was talking. So Noah, I'll give the next one to you. What supports are offered on your campus for all students? And then how do students access that? And then do students need some type of support plan through your office in order to access those supports? Or again, is it more universal?
Yeah, great question. My name is Noah Cooperrider. I use he, they pronouns. I am a coordinator at North Central. There are many resources, and I think that the specific ones are going to depend on the college or university that you go to. But some of the ones that I would expect a lot of colleges and universities to have is at North Central, we have a writing center for students to be able to help with writing and writing papers from end to end, whether you're starting or you're doing the final edit. There's a speaking center to help you with speeches that you're going to encounter in your classes. There's a tutoring program available for many classes that's available to work with tutors to help you with that more specific help with the academic side of things, like not more on the access side with accommodations, but really what is the proficiency and content of that class and how can we get better. Office hours are going to be really critical for that in that same way too. I think that tutoring and office hours pair really well together to get the expectations of the class from the professor, reading that syllabus and reinforcing that in the tutoring. A little bit different, but I don't know. Some schools have counseling that's available. That's usually separate from our program. Sometimes that's inside SDS, that really depends on what school you go to, but usually there's a counseling center where you can get counseling. There's a career center for help on how do I take what I'm learning and apply that either in an internship or like where am I going with this? How can I prepare for the future? Most of those do not require, at least at our school, none of those require you to have accommodations. Um, Sometimes you need accommodations to help you with accessing specific parts of it, depending on what your disability is. But really, it's making sure that you have an account, making sure that you're planning an appointment. That's really important. It's just making sure that you're being proactive. A lot of times, you can't just show up and say, "Hey, I'm here. Can you help me?" It does take a little bit of planning and making sure that you know the process on how to get an appointment. Sometimes there's drop-in hours, but typically with those universal supports, that's not something that you need specifically accommodations. The only one that I can think of is academic coaching, which is something our office does, where we work on those time management skills, we work on that communication skills, organization. Sometimes, if students need that help, I will help them with that if they have accommodations.
Mhm.
But for the most part, there's a lot of supports that you might be used to through special education at your school that are just available broadly, and you need to go seek those out. And if you need help finding them, we will help you find them and get there, but you will need to start that contact yourself.
Great. Again, saw a lot of head nods through that. Anything else other folks want to add? Great. Diamond, have the next one for you. What documentation should students be ready to share with you all to justify the need for their accommodations? And when would they need to bring something more than just their high school paperwork to justify those accommodations?
Sure. My name is Diamond Cole. I am over at University of Chicago. So to go through our documentation process or some of the key things to consider in documentation would be completed by a provider, obviously, one's license, as well as a description of the disability, the diagnosis, the history. Is this a new diagnosis? Is this something you had since you were 2 years old? What does that evolution also look like as well? Maybe transitioning out of high school now to college. Also talking about maybe the frequency, the severity of the condition as well is super helpful for us to go through our process as well. And some things to consider when looking for more documentation through our office would be maybe for housing accommodations. So anything maybe like a single room accommodation and a release from housing, things like that, that we consider would be a little bit above the bar. We would ask that students go back to their providers, have them fill out more documentation, as well as any accommodations, like maybe a peer note taker. That's something that's not as common, at least within our college. So we are asking that students maybe go back for any accommodations that are not like exam or anything that's like note-taking technology. We really do ask students to come back and provide more information on that.
Anything else other colleges or universities want to bring in that regard? Awesome. We're doing great on time. The next question, Tina, I'll send this one to you. In high school, sometimes we play very, very, very nice. Are there accommodations that maybe again talking about in order to get the degree from your university, which has a lot of their stigma around, hey, Illinois, when you get an education from you all, here's what it means. And I know every college just the same has that. What are some accommodations that students may come to you with that aren't as common in terms of implementing on your campus? And I know it's a case by case basis. So there will always be individual conversations, but are there any big ones that you see come frequently that you need to have those conversations with students about?
Yes, there are a few that definitely stick out in my mind. So the difference between accommodations and adaptation, like you're not going to have anything adapted in college. So in other words, if you only have to do the evens and the odds or whatever, one or the other on a homework assignment, that will not apply here. You have to do all of the assignments, all of the presentations, all of the papers, just like everyone else. We do provide things like disability-related absences or disability-related extensions on time. However, those are not a carte blanche for every assignment. It does not mean that you do not have to go to class. The way that we word it when we talk with students is that your disability should be under control, number one, and you should know how to take care of your needs. Of course, there are things when you have disabilities, you can't always predict what's going to happen, right? We expect that to happen from time to time. So if you have a disability such as epilepsy or severe depression or something to that, anything really, where you're having an exacerbation of your disability, then you might need to take the day. If you've got floaters and you can't see anything and your eyes are just struggling and you've got severe migraines and you're throwing up, like what are you going to do? That's disability related. That would be an excused absence. Or if there was an assignment due that day and you can't get there because of those things, that would be an accommodation where you could contact your professor and ask for an extension. But this is only something that you can do maybe once or twice in a whole semester, not for every assignment. And so the way we say it is that if the rest of the class gets 3 absences without any penalty, you get those 3 absences too, but then you might get 1 or 2 more absences just for the case of dealing with your disability if you have any issues come up. So I think that's a large one, is making sure that students understand things are not adapted, but they are accommodated. So what it is we're giving you the steps and the supports to have access to the class, but the accommodations are not guaranteeing you success. You're the one that has to put in the work and give the effort and ask for assistance and go to office hours or tutoring if you need it.
Great. Thank you. Anything else other folks want to add? Again, I think the highlight of that, if there's an what we would maybe consider an accommodation, your institution may consider that an adaptation or a modification to the criteria. And in that case, that would be more of a no, but the accommodation would be a yes.
I will also add, I know a lot of people are really scared as coming into freshmen if you're required to live on campus in the dorms. Of course, we do help and work with our housing department for accommodations for housing. But the expectation, at least at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, is that it's an in-person university and that you live in the dorms for your freshman year. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And I know it's scary for a lot of freshmen, but that's where you make your friends. That's how you learn to live with other people. That's how you learn to cooperate. And they're all about building those communities on campus. And lately, we've had a lot of students and parents coming in saying they have to have a single room. And I've got ADHD, I can't focus, I can't study. That is not a reason for a single room. There are study areas, there are libraries, there's all other places that you can go. So I think instead of getting hung up on, I have to have a single room, I'm too scared, open your mind a little bit. I mean, we do provide accommodations, but generally those are for our students that like have a personal assistant that has to help them get dressed in the morning, or they've got a lot of equipment in their room to help them breathe. Those are the kind of students that we're giving single rooms to for disabilities. So it's just something to consider. Try to prepare yourself now if you're going to school in the fall to get a roommate, to try that process out. You can always switch. They do allow that if you don't match with your roommate. So that's another thing I would add.
Great. Thank you. Next question, Tammy. This is actually a question from a student, which I thought was a pretty fun one. Let's just say they're in a class and they've requested accommodations and the professor doesn't follow that approved accommodation. How would the student problem solve that?
I always recommend that students talk directly to the professor, maybe remind them that they have accommodations. The professor may not implement it, not out of viciousness or anything like that, just forgot. And so we'd always ask for the student to advocate on their own behalf first. And then if they continue to have problems or it's not resolved, they can always come back to us and we will help advocate on their behalf.
Great. Yeah, self-advocacy is a big thing, and especially as so only senior students are attending this, and I think that's something that we're even encouraging our seniors, right? Like, let your case manager know, but also have that conversation. Sure, there was a misunderstanding, and we can work out that resolution. So that's a big skill that we want to try building as well. Another question from a student, if their IEP or 504 plan that they had here in high school doesn't have an accommodation, but they'd like to request that. Is that possible? And then vice versa, if their plan says they get accommodations, but they don't want that, what's that process look like? And I'll pass it off to Kitty.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think I heard Tammy say similarly that they have an interactive process at the University of Chicago. We also have, and I assume most places do. But so we always encourage students to come in. We have to have a conversation when we determine these accommodations. So whether or not you are sure if you will be approved, at least it's worth applying and coming in and talking to one of our directors, seeing if there is some way to actually accommodate what you are asking for. And then even let's say you get approved for that accommodation, you do not have to use that accommodation. Sometimes we actually encourage students to just apply regardless in case they need it. Some students, especially UChicago, thrives on being very tough and academically rigorous. And some students come in and they say, I don't want to use any of the supports I had in K through 12. I want to just try this out. But it's easier if you just come in, get those accommodations. You don't have to use them. We have a rolling application process, so you can apply at any time throughout the year, regardless of what term we are in. So I would say just apply and have that conversation with one of our directors, and we will see what we can do. And you don't have to use it if you don't want to use it.
Right. Similar across other campuses, same thing, that interactive process, that appointment is where those conversations happen. Great. Next question. What are your college's policies related to late work and missing assignments? Noah, I'll pass that off to you and see if anyone else wants to piggyback.
Yeah, sounds good. At North Central, this is determined by the professor. It will be in the syllabus. So class to class, it will be a little bit different, but I would just expect that if you are missing work or if it is late, I would just anticipate first that it probably will not count or that you won't get points. It's not necessarily, but this is really something that you will have to ask the professor about what that policy is. I would not assume that you will get credit for it or that you'll be able to turn it in. I would actually assume the opposite because it's more likely that there will be a penalty to how late it is, that it won't be allowed, that there's some kind of stipulation, there's some kind of limitation. But it really is important to note that that really does matter from class to class. That's the distinction. I would not assume that you can just turn in everything late. You really need to be intentional about learning the policies of every class, making prioritizations of like if one class is more flexible than another one, then you need to plan accordingly for that. Because even with accommodations for flexibility, I think that Tina really said this very well. It's something that happens when there's a disability impact, and it's something that happens occasionally, not across the board as a blanket. You're not going to get an accommodation that says all of my assignments are able to be turned in 2 days later. That really has an impact on the learning outcomes of the class for everyone else. There's going to be a lot more collaborative work where you're working on things with other students, where you're reviewing things at the same time, and turning it in late means that you're missing that. And that's fundamentally altering what's going on in the class, which we're not able to do. So I would say that the safe answer is it depends on the class and the syllabus, but I would not anticipate that you can just turn in things late as an assumption.
Great. Anything else other folks want to add? Along the same lines, I guess, while we have extra time, we at our two Naperville high schools have a pretty defined reassessment process. So kids take an assessment, say on a math quiz. They do poorly, they're able to retake that assessment, do some extra practice, etc. I see some head nods in the nose. I guess what can students expect in terms of how to prepare best for assessments? And are there situations where they are able to get reassessments? So Noah, maybe I'll keep it on you and then save the last one for Diamond.
Sure. I guess fundamentally, one of the differences between the laws when you're in high school and when you're in college is with ADA, it's about getting access to the material. And when you are asking to retest on something, you're not getting access to it. You are basically ensuring success on it. And that's just a very different thing. That's really why I feel comfortable saying I can't imagine that retesting would be approved as an accommodation anywhere because it's not about being able to access the material on the test. With accommodations, the purpose is the first time that you see this test, your barriers to disabilities are being addressed. And that when you first take this, you are able to access the information that is on that test the first time, and you're being assessed on that information in an equal way that takes into account your disability. So preparing for the test, making sure that you're utilizing that extra time and any resources that you need during the test, you should be getting that the first time. It really goes to the differences between the way that the law is written for how accommodations are written in high school and college. Moving forward, it's an access thing, and retesting is not access.
Yeah. And I think, Noah, I think you had the questions earlier about universal supports that are in place, right? So making sure that before those assessments, students are utilizing those resources. And if you learn the hard way the first time, maybe that'll encourage the use of those additional supports that your campus has for future assessments. Great. Last question, Diamond. What are your policies regarding parent communications? Can parents call and email professors asking about a progress towards grades, etc.? How's that handled on your campus?
Sure. For our office, we do encourage parents to reach out for educational reasons, maybe to learn a little bit more about our process. But unfortunately, we are really not able to share anything specifically about the student's case, where they are, have they even registered with our office. We do allow for the student to communicate that with their parents. So for example, if a parent does reach out in regards to their student, we do redirect that email back over to the student and say, hey, if you would like to share anything over to with your parents or maybe with their guardian, you are able to do so. So we put that in the student's hand. With professors, I'm not exactly sure if they have an open line of communication with parents or guardians, but usually no. But again, we do encourage students and their parents to come together and maybe grab documentation together, look at the website to get educated on accommodations and transition over to college. But unfortunately, no, we do have direct communication in regards to a student's case with the parent.
Anything other colleges or universities want to add in terms of parent communication?
Here at ISU, well, if a parent reaches out to us, we're more than happy to talk to them if the student's present and the student agrees to it. And so the student has to be a part of that communication pattern. And for faculty in that, we are protected, they're protected by FERPA, which is a federal regulation. And so our university faculty members are not going to release information about students. Students need to communicate directly with their parents or guardians to make sure that they're aware of their standing. And so, yeah, students are protected from having to share information.
Great, thank you, Tammy. Tina, anything else you want to add?
I was just going to say, parents, don't be that parent. Don't contact your kids' professors. Just don't do it. It never goes over well. And the professor can't say anything to you anyway, but it's going to probably hurt your student more than it's going to help them. So just don't do that.
Right. We still have a few extra minutes, so I don't know, folks in the room, if you have questions that you'd like to be answered, or other individuals, if you wanted to put in the chat, we'll maybe be able to field a couple of extra questions before we head out today. Yeah.
So in terms of AI use, because AI is very new,
Yeah.
like what's the rule with AI? Because I know there's tools and there's like AI tools that are not good for you. So the differentiation between those two and the rules with AI.
Yeah. So for others, if you couldn't hear that, just what are the rules about use of AI on your campus? And if anyone would like to field this, lots of smirks.
We encourage you to use AI in a legal. And so if you want to take a chapter of a book and make notes or study notes through AI, something like that, but do not use it to help you write a paper. Those types of things are not acceptable. And I think some students think that they might be able to get away with it, but needless to say, the faculty have learned ways to identify it. And so, but there are some productive ways to use AI. Again, around executive functioning, an AI can be very helpful with time management, being able to plug in what you need to do and help you with the time management piece, those types of things. But there's some great ways to use it and not so great ways to use it. So it's important that you learn the difference.
Yeah. Awesome. I saw another hand up. Yeah.
We have a lot of a trend towards incompletes when students don't complete stuff by the end of the semester. And a lot of that's due to extended time and things like that. How does that work at college?
Yeah, so at the end of semesters, we can issue an incomplete if something happens to allow that work to be made up within a certain time frame after the semester ends. Is it a case-by-case basis for you all? Is there an accommodation that would extend past the class's deadline? How does that work?
I can try to start this one. It is available at college, sort of, but at least at North Central, but it's not an accommodation. It's a determination by the professor themselves. And in the student handbook, there is very specific guidelines about when that would or would not be appropriate. Like at North Central, you have to have gotten through 70% of the class in good standing. So if it's for cases where you started and were successful but can't complete, the most I could do, and I don't even really try to do this, is a recommendation. But I try to stay out of that because to me that's not an accommodation or an access issue.
Got it. Good question.
2 questions in the chat.
Yeah.
For documentation, how recent does a diagnosis need to be?
So if someone has, or sorry, go ahead. Someone was about to answer that.
So the state of Illinois actually has a regulation that was put in place last year that states if the student has paperwork from a healthcare provider or is it listed on an IEP or 504 plan that has the diagnostic information on it already, we can't put the burden on the student to get additional diagnostic information. We can ask that they get additional supporting wording for the specific accommodations being requested, but we can't put additional burden for diagnostic information.
Great. And I believe you have a.
What accommodations might a student in college need in college, but not in high school? So for example, peer note taking was something that was said, which is something we don't offer at the high school level. Is there anything else you can think of that is offered at college that isn't at the high school?
At the University of Chicago, peer note taking is a bigger one for us just because we're on a quarter system. So students are working, Diamond, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's 7 to 8 weeks is our quarter system. So you are doing an entire like term worth of material in 7 to 8 weeks. So it's very rigorous, it's very intense. That's, I think, when students tend to feel, okay, I'm in a 3 hour lecture. I can't focus this long. I might need a peer note taker. We also will have students at U Chicago, a lot of faculty members still prefer to keep a technology-free classroom. So they don't like their students to have laptops at times. So that is sometimes an accommodation that we will have to talk about is whether a student can have a laptop in class, those sorts of things. Not necessarily different because of, an act of a point of it's going to make it easier as a class, just more that since it is a more intensive class, you might be asking for supports you didn't feel you needed in a semester system versus a quarter system, but that is at the University of Chicago.
And then also just a second, Kitty, there are accommodations like priority registration. This may not be a thing in high school or even know what that is, but that is the opportunity to go ahead and register maybe in front of your class because of your condition. Again, it is a higher bar as well, and we do see students maybe with ADHD requesting this. And we do ask for additional documentation with that, going along with what Kitty said, some note-taking technologies like access to Glean. That's something that we do over at Chicago as well.
Great. Yeah, go ahead, Tina.
And at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, just because it's a little different, priority access to early registration is for every student that registers with our office automatically.
That is a very big one. I'm glad that question was brought up. So something to talk about with your campus is whether or not you get priority access to register for certain classes based on what you feel like you need. Again, that goes to the first question, right? Students need to be able to articulate what they need to be able to justify that for some campuses if it's not universal.
I think another one to point out, I'm not exactly sure how it works in the K through 12 system, but audio recording classes or videotaping courses, you can get an accommodation for it if needed, but otherwise it is illegal to record a faculty member under the Illinois state laws. And so just be aware of that, recording classes is not permissible unless you have an accommodation to do so.
Thanks for bringing that up. We got time for one last question.
I'll make it quick. So, some colleges offer emotional support animals, most commonly like cats, like small animals. How would that impact, like, having roommates, just having like the college life in general?
Were you able to hear that question? So if someone were to have like an emotional support animal, what was mentioned was like a cat, how would that impact the rooming situation or other college living experiences?
I can take that.
Oh, go ahead. Tina.
I was just going to say, emotional support animals, there is a process that you have to go through in order to get one. You have to have appropriate documentation from your doctor that you need one. And it is, the pet is only allowed to be in your dorm, in your room situation. It is not, the emotional support animals are not animals that you take with you to class or you go walk, labs and things like that. You can't take them. So it's only to be in your dorm room. And there's a process usually most campuses have for finding roommates. And we have kind of, it's sort of like a Facebook thing, like you create your new profile as a new freshman and you choose a new roommate. And so you put all the, whether you're a morning person, a night person, allergic to cats, that kind of thing. So when you're matching with a roommate, you would want to make sure that you list something like that so that you can make sure that you've got someone who can handle the support animal, but also know that they are very strict with the ESAs, and you've got to make sure that you are taking care of it and that it is not pooping and peeing everywhere or vomiting everywhere. You've got to keep up the cleanliness. If it messes up your dorm room, they will ask it to leave. So
Great. Well, I just want to say that was our bell. I really appreciate the five of you making time today and sharing with us. We'll be sharing this link out via email, so if anyone wants to watch the recording, they're able to. So thank you all again. Appreciate your time this morning. Have a good day.